Welcome to the Inner Peace and Other Cool Shit podcast, the show that helps you find freedom from anxiety, overthinking, worry and stress. I'm Siobhan Friel, a fellow human being, transformational coach and your new friend. Come and hang out with me as we explore a whole new understanding of the human experience so you can enjoy life with more peace and ease. Oh, hello. Welcome back to the show. Here's a riddle for you. What speeds up the more you try and slow it down? A human mind. I would also say a baby gleefully crawling towards some stairs. And time. Time definitely seems to speed up the more we try and slow it down. Okay, that riddle was actually quite rubbish, wasn't it? All right, well, let's move on from that then. Today we're talking about the incredible self-regulating, self-fixing, self-calming nature of a human mind, and how we rarely experience this amazing design because we're mistakenly keeping it all revved up, because it seems like we need to. I've mentioned this settling thing a few times on the show already, but we're going to get into it in a bit more depth today because it is so awesome. It was also the main theme of one of my very first insights into how humans work and all the stuff we talk about around here, like the nature of thoughts and feelings, yada yada. I talk about this more in episode 6, maybe 6. Seeing that a mind settles on its own is pretty huge for my clients too. It opens up a whole new way of seeing the nature of thought and our human experience and all that cool shit. So let's get into it. As always, try and listen with an open mind, completely blank, rather than smush what I'm saying into something you think you already know. Of course, you can't actually help where your thoughts go either, so don't worry too much about what I just said. Just listen fresh as best you can and as best that your human brain will let you. So when we are caught up in chattering, frantic, frenzied overthinking, the stuff that we may call stress, anxiety, overwhelm, panic, or any of that, our mind will settle down completely on its own. Our mind is always settling. That's its natural state, its baseline. Settled, peaceful and calm. And then we think over the top of all the calm with lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of thoughts. If you remember from the last episode, that's just a brain being a brain. Okay, so far so good. But if you're like most people, including me, before I noticed this for myself, you'll be like, what the actual hell is this? There's no way that my mind settles on its own. It's been sped up all my life. I'm constantly feeling stress, anxiety and overwhelm. This is utter rubbish. Well, we're exploring all that today, so just hang out. So once I saw for myself that a mind settles completely on its own, it made perfect sense to me. And let me tell you why. Us humans have created enormously complex existences where we've made up everything, right? From money to education to work to what counts as a threat, what we should be doing, what's a good use of our time, our appearance, and about 87 trillion other things. Humans have done that. We've created these intricate norms and values and constructs and ideas that we live within. And it's all made of thought. Often many, 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 many layers of thought. And when we all agree on these thoughts, we call it reality. But there's something else at play through all of our human experience and that of the world, which is nature. As in, what's happening when we aren't thinking about it? What's happening already before we think? What's already happening before we make up stuff? What happens naturally, by nature? How our hearts beat even when we're asleep? How enormous trees grow from tiny seeds and how thousands of birds migrate in sync? How the tides rise and fall and how flowers point themselves towards the sun, like how you and me and all the humans were created from a smattering of microscopic cells. All of that stuff that we didn't imagine, all of that stuff which is already happening, all of that stuff which we didn't create in our mind, all that stuff which is happening by nature, compared to like money, for example, which is not a thing in nature. That's a thing that humans have made up. Do you see what I mean? So nature has got it covered, and us humans are part of nature too. We are nature. And by nature, our bodies are always self-regulating. Our bodies regulate our temperature, and cuts heal all by themselves. We get a fever to fight an infection, and we get sleepy when we need rest, and we get sick when we need to get rid of whatever's inside that's making us unwell. Well, our minds are like that too. They are self-correcting, self-healing, self-regulating. Do you think that living in a constant state of anxiety and stress is the intention of nature, when the nature of the world is to thrive? It makes complete sense to me that, of course, our mind is not going to be exempt from the thriving nature of nature. So, of course, just like when we cut ourselves, whatever intelligent energy heals that cut is also settling a very speedy mind, which is revved up from all of the human-created thought constructs that plague us. We are nature. Yay! Okay, so if what I'm talking about here feels unfamiliar to you and you're like, what? My mind is constantly stirred up. There's no way it's always settling. I knew it. I'm totally broken. If that's you, then I hear you. Too few of us are experiencing this cool, automatic settling mechanism thing because we innocently just don't let our minds settle. Imagine your mind as a kettle. If you boil a kettle, after a few moments of furious bubbling, it will start to settle down pretty quickly until the water is still and calm. It will naturally do this when it's not agitated, let's say, by the heat. I'm not sure what the scientific term is, probably not agitated, but it works in this context. Most of us are keeping our kettles boiling with our thinking so much that we don't experience the settling that I'm talking about, because we're always boiling. It looks to me that we're keeping our minds very busy in two big ways. Two ways which look really necessary, but we've never actually questioned them. But if we saw through these, it would make a huge difference. So this is what it looks like to me. The first way that we keep our mind busy and speedy is by thinking about all of our problems or issues. I've talked about this before, but it's worth repeating 1 billion times because it's a massive blind spot. Us humans think that the solutions and answers and fixes we need are found by thinking about them. But they really aren't, and any idea or solution we've had has come to us despite our ruminating, analysing and worrying. That's why we're all familiar with the notion of an idea coming to us in the shower, or while driving, or gardening, or in bed. But we don't really realise this, or we don't fully trust it enough to let our thinking go. Thinking our way to solutions is like keeping our thumb on the boil switch on the kettle. We innocently do this when it looks like our feelings are being caused by the outside world, so we must fix whatever's happening in the outside world in order to feel okay. We need to find a solution to the problem with our colleague, or find a better relationship, or implement a new budget to curb our spending, or discipline our child in the best way, or find our life purpose and execute this to the fullness of our being. So we think about it. Think, and that keeps the kettle furiously boiling away, full of thoughts. The second way that we keep our mind busy and don't notice the settling that it always wants to do is by trying to quieten or change our thinking. Oh, the hilarious irony. We may innocently do this when we get a feel for the fact that our busy thinking is causing our overwhelm or stress or anxiety, rather than a thing in the outside world. So we think we just need better, calmer thinking. So we try tools and techniques and strategies to change or quieten our thinking, like reframing our thoughts, finding the positive, challenging our thoughts, or meditation, journaling, and all that kind of thing. But guess what? All of that all of that, even well-intentioned, is still extra thought in an already busy mind. We're still boiling the kettle. Both of these ways that we keep our mind from settling are rooted in the same misunderstanding about thoughts that's keeping many of us stuck and suffering. If you haven't already, you may want to go back and listen to episode 2 where I talk about this in more detail. This misunderstanding is that we think that what we think is actually important and that thoughts are personal and meaningful, so we must do something with our thoughts, including thinking about them to quiet them or change them or act on them. Using our thinking to quiet or change our thinking is like pedaling furiously on a bicycle to get it to stop. In a hilarious paradox of the human condition, like maybe an April Fool's joke by Mother Nature, the thing that we want most, which is ultimately to feel nicer, right, is designed to happen naturally. Only we prevent it from happening because of our misunderstanding of what it takes to feel better. Are you with me? Good one, Mother Nature. Aren't you funny? Actually, I feel a bit guilty saying that about Mother Nature playing a joke on us because nature is perfect and was designed just wonderfully. It was us humans who got it all mixed up. So I take that back. Sorry for calling you a jokester, Mother Nature. Okay, what have we got so far then? Our minds are designed to settle on their own, yay. But us humans are keeping them sped up and rarely experience this settling because we think we need to think about stuff. Boo. It sounds simple though, doesn't it, what I'm talking about here? Oh good, the next time I'm feeling all frenzied and frantic and full of stressful, urgent, busy, speedy thoughts, I'll just let my mind settle. Siobhan says that happens all on its own, so I'll just hang out here and not think. Yeah, right. The experience of it doesn't seem to be like that. Some people seem to click with this straight away, which is great, but for most people I work with, and definitely myself, it took time to see that this is the way it works. We're so used to rolling around and engaging in the content of our thinking, and thinking that we need to do that in order to get on with life, that trusting that it settles on its own is a big shift in perspective and experience. But like everything I'm talking about on this show, just being open to the possibility that it works this way is helpful and makes it much more likely that you'll see something new. Here's an illustration for you. Let's call the state of mind where we think we spend most of our time our mental home, the mental place we are at most often. A lot of us would say that our mental home is a troubled place of busyness, a place of insecurity, stress, overwhelm and worry, because that's where we spend the most time in our head, it seems. So that home in the mind is a leaking, battered tent, which has that tent smell, which is like old mud and sweat and the faint whiff of animals. So we think that this tent is our home. We think this is just life. This is what it's like to be me. Then every so often, if we're lucky, we'll notice that we don't feel quite as bad as normal and perhaps we're temporarily in a caravan. Even more rarely, we may be in a budget hotel room rather than the tent and think, oh, this is quite nice. And, rarer still, we'll spend some time in a beautiful glass-fronted chalet in the mountains with a roaring fire, a wall of books, an amazing coffee machine and thriving houseplants. God, it's beautiful! But we still think the tent is our real home and anything else is just a temporary holiday. But guess what? No one lives in a tent. Not in this metaphor anyway. We're all meant to live in the glass-fronted chalet or whatever your house porn is, like a beach view condo or a sailing boat or a magical teepee or an enormous country mansion. So let's say you spend 95% of your time in the smelly tent and 5% of your time in the chalet. And, by the way, I'm completely making up these numbers. It doesn't matter what the ratio is. It's just an illustration. But then you realise that the chalet is your home. Like you really start to get that, yeah? So you would end up spending less time in the tent because you realise you don't need to be there so much. It's not your home. You have a lovely home in the mountains. Us humans are designed to be guided back to home, and the only thing keeping us from experiencing this is the misunderstanding about the utility of our thinking. Are you with me? And if you're not, don't worry. If what I'm talking about here sounds like too simple, like you think it can't possibly work this way because it's that simple, then that's okay and kind of expected, because we live in a world which pathologizes the human condition and mistakenly teaches us to use our intellect and analytical thought to navigate life. This is all completely innocent and well-meaning. We just got it wrong. Oops. So if you are skeptical at this point, I'd ask you to consider if all of that skepticism is extra thought, like your kettle is boiling. What if that is all that's happening? And by the way, you can't control whether you feel skeptical or not. We don't control what thoughts pop into our head, okay? But we can kind of have a say in what we do with them. So if you are having skeptical flavoured thoughts right now, just hold them lightly and consider that maybe they're kettle boiling. You've spent a long time, and so did I, in the old way of looking at human psychology and how thoughts are meaningful and the world is out to get us and we're broken and we just need to find the right fix and all of that stuff. But it's not working for you, is it? So how about holding all of that lightly and exploring the possibility that maybe nature has got you completely covered and it's designed perfectly to bring you back to peace. Your mind will settle on its own if you let it. And you can let it by being open to seeing that you don't need to think about your problems or find solutions or fix things. You don't need to change your thinking or do stuff to try and calm your mind. It will happen by nature without your interference. Wouldn't this be really awesome? I've mentioned Michael Neill in a previous episode. He's a really cool speaker, coach, teacher, and author, and he shares the kind of stuff that we talk about around here. He says, and this is perfect, there's nothing you can do that will quiet the mind faster than doing nothing to quiet the mind. The impact of seeing for yourself that your mind is always coming back to peace and that your thinking is always settling is very freeing. I'd love for you to try this on. So to explore this for yourself in your own life, here's a few things to bear in mind. Be willing to see something new. Be willing to be totally and utterly wrong about the way you think your mind works and what thoughts and feelings mean. Being wrong is very cool. Be open to considering that it works in the way that I've described today. And rather importantly, and something I haven't mentioned yet, let anything that you may see or experience around this unfold in whatever way it wants to. Like, best you can, try not to make up how long it takes for a mind to settle or how it should have happened already or it obviously doesn't work. All of that is the boiling kettle. So relax and be open and curious, well, as best you can, because we know that our brain is going to have a lot to say about all of this. Okay, so Anxious Alice has been hanging out with us from episode 1. She kind of resonates with what we're talking about here, and she can see how she keeps her mind from settling in the 2 ways I mentioned earlier. She notices that when it looks like her anxiety is being caused by a looming deadline at work, she engages with her thinking. She tries to find a way to fit more work in before the deadline, or to anticipate what the client response will be, or to try and pull in more effort from her team. She notices how all of that thought really looks like it needs to be thunk. It seems like she really needs to figure all that stuff out. It's a total 180 for Alice to consider that what she's thinking doesn't actually matter. What matters is that she's thinking a ton, and that's stopping her mind from calming and stopping her feeling of anxiety from easing. Alice is like, holy fuck! All the time I thought I was helping myself by thinking of ways to get my anxiety to go away by solving the problem, but it was my thinking that kept it in place. It's not often that Alice has a holy fuck moment. Normally this kind of thing is very incremental for her, a gradual dawning and a gradual change in understanding. So if you don't have a holy fuck moment, don't worry about it because you don't need one. Okay, let's bring this baby home. The main thing I want you to take away from this episode is that your mind will settle all on its own. It will calm down naturally. Trying to calm your mind is going to keep it speedy. Trying to solve the problems that look like they are causing your horrid feelings will keep them in place. This is a complete paradox to the way we think it works, so just be patient and open-minded. It's kind of like falling asleep. We don't do anything to fall asleep. It happens on its own eventually. But it happens faster and easier when we aren't trying very hard to fall asleep and when we aren't doing espresso shots at 11 p.m. Okay, I've used a boiling kettle, a smelly tent, and now falling asleep to try and illustrate this stuff. Take what resonates, leave the rest, and join me again next time to see what we see about this being human thing. Okay, bye! Thank you so much for listening. This is the part where I ask you to share, review, and subscribe to the show. So if you go and do that, I would absolutely love it. If you have thoughts or questions or insights about this episode or anything really, come and share them with me on Instagram at SiobhanFriel or visit me at siobhanfriel.com. See you next time.